Before they noticed me, I quickly took 7 photos. Suddenly, David jumped off the bed and yelled, "Give me that camera." I reached behind me and pulled out the tool I had hidden in my pants. He stopped, sneered, and said, "You don't have the guts." The next moment, he fell to the floor, screaming. "Oh my God," my father exclaimed, "you did that to your own brother." I replied calmly, "The only reason you're still here is because I'd rather let Mom take care of you herself." My wife, Sonia, who I'd been married to for 9 years, was crying. "Please don't end me, I'm begging you," she pleaded. I ignored her and said to my father, "I don't know what makes me angrier, you cheating with my wife, or you doing things with her that she never did with me. Anyway, I'm quitting. You'll need to change the sign on the building from Dawson & Sons to Dawson & Son. Actually, maybe just Dawson's if that a-hole passes away. I don't see anyone rushing to call emergency to help him." As I turned to leave, he asked where I was headed. "I'm going to your place to show Mom the pictures," I said. "Hold on, we need to talk," he replied. "You might need to talk, but I don't want to hear it," I responded. As I headed out the door, he shouted, "Bobby, don't walk away, talk to me." I ignored him. While walking to my car, I punctured the front and rear tires on the right side of his car. I didn't want him speeding off to get to Mom before I did. I drove 2 blocks, then pulled over and called my mom. I wanted to give her the pictures in person, but with an emergency being called for David, the police would probably show up at my parents' house. When she answered, I told her I was sending some photos she needed to see before Dad got home. She had questions, but I told her I'd call back later. I looked at my watch and realized I had about an hour before the bank closed. As I drove there, I thought about what had just happened. I'd come back a day early from a business trip and saw my dad's car in my driveway. I didn't think much of it at first since I always asked him to check on Sonia when I was away to make sure she was okay and if she needed anything. Of course, when I said she might need something, I didn't mean anything like this. Anyway, as soon as I walked in the front door, the noise from the bedroom made it clear what was happening. I went to the den, grabbed the lockbox from the bottom drawer of my desk, unlocked it, took out the Colt, and tucked it into my belt, just in case. I pulled out my phone, turned on the camera, and walked to the bedroom. There was Sonia on her knees with David, and my father standing behind them. That's when I realized why I was always sent out of town while David stayed home. After getting to the bank, I emptied all our accounts and cashed out the 6 certificates of deposit from the safe deposit box. When I left, I had just over $18,000. Then, I went to the bank where the company's accounts were held and withdrew $15,000. I considered it severance pay, though some might call it embezzlement. But honestly, I wasn't too worried about that, considering I might already be wanted for assault with a tool. Before leaving town, I made one last call to David's wife, Cindy. I reached her just as she was about to head to the hospital to visit David. As soon as she recognized my voice, she said, "Bob, what's going on? Your dad just called and told me what you did to Dave." I explained, I got back from a business trip and caught him in bed with Sonia. I took some photos, and when he tried to grab the camera from me, I got him in the leg. "I'm sending the photos to your email. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but I thought you should know. Take care, Cindy, bye." After hanging up, I drove past the city limit sign and headed west. About 5 miles out, I pulled over and parked. To avoid being tracked, I took the battery out of my phone. I thought about throwing the phone away but decided to keep it to save the photos. I planned to get a disposable phone later. I kept driving, trying to get as far away from Michigan as possible. After 2 days of driving, I reached Colorado. I checked into a motel just outside Denver and decided to call home using a prepaid phone I picked up at a Walmart in Kansas. Since it was 4 in the afternoon, my dad, if he was still alive, would be at work. My mom answered after 3 rings. "Hello," she said. "Hey, Mom," I replied. "Bob, where are you?" she asked. Since the police were probably looking for me, I thought it was best to be vague. So I said, "On my way to New York." "Why on earth are you heading to New York?" she asked. "I'm just trying to put as much distance as possible between myself, Sonia, David, and Dad." "Did you really have to do that to David? He's never going to walk properly again. He's lucky I didn't end him," I replied. I thought Cindy deserved that satisfaction. She didn't end him, but she did kick him out of their house. "Sending those pictures was harsh," she said. "It wasn't harsh. She deserved to know what kind of man she was married to." "I sent them to you for the same reason," I replied. "That was a waste of time for you. I already knew he was a jerk. I knew he cheated sometimes, but I put up with it to keep the family together. But Sonia, I couldn't ignore that. I kicked him out and met with a lawyer the next day to start the divorce process. You need to come back. I'm going to end up with the business, and I'll need your help to run it." Why do you think that? I asked. The business was set up with money I inherited from my father. My lawyer says I'll get 60 to 65%, which will give me control. I'm going to need your help. Are you planning to keep the business as Dawson & Sons or change it to Dawson & Son with me as the son? I asked. Don't be like that, Bob. Dave is my son, just like you are. If he's around, I won't be. I can't be near him without wanting to hurt him. You should call Sonia. She needs to talk to you, she said. I don't want to talk to her, so I'll skip it. You might as well get used to the idea. Divorce usually comes with counseling, and you'll have to talk to her then. What divorce? I just left her. I'm not spending money on a lawyer. Eventually, she'll want to be single again, so she can handle the divorce and pay for it herself. Bob, do you really need to insult her like that? Why not? That's what she is. What do you call a married woman who's with 2 men on the bed her husband bought? 403 is actually pretty tame. I just called to let you know I'm alright, and I'll try to check in once a week. Talk to you later. Love you. Bye. I didn't hear anything about the $15,000 I withdrew from the company account, so I figured they hadn't noticed it yet. I spent a week in Denver getting to know the area. It was nice, and I did feel a bit drawn to the mountains, but I decided it was too early to settle down. I needed to keep moving to make it harder for them to find me. I stopped in Castle Rock and had lunch at a place called Tricosi's. While I was there, I tried calling Mom to let her know I was okay, but there was no answer. On a whim, I decided to call the business. Good morning, thanks for calling Dawson & Sons. How can I help you? Morning, Glenda. Is my mom around? Bobby, where are you? Things are falling apart here. You need to come back. Not going to happen. Is Mom there? I'll transfer you. Bob. Morning, Mom. How's New York? New York's behind me. I didn't like it much. I'm in Georgia now, in a town called Dawson. I'm having breakfast at a cozy place called Town & Country. I'm seriously thinking of settling here. You need to come back home. I don't think so. I need time to get over what happened. If I came back now, I might end up hurting Dad and Dave if I had to be around them. I need some time before I even think about coming back. Could you at least call Sonia and talk to her? I'm really worried about her. She's a mess right now. She made this mess herself. She can deal with it on her own. I'm serious, Bob. I'm afraid she might do something to hurt herself. Like what? Self-ending. I wouldn't rule it out. From my perspective, it might be quicker and cheaper than a divorce. That's really harsh. Harsh. Try coming home from a business trip and finding your wife in bed with 2 men, doing things with them that she'd never do with you. She's lucky I didn't end her after what I did to David. She's dead to me, and I'd appreciate it if you never bring her up again. I didn't raise my voice, but I asked, Mom, have you forgotten who those 2 men were? I said I'd call her later and hung up, nearly throwing my phone in frustration. I couldn't believe she was still pushing me to deal with Sonia after everything that had happened. I drove out of Castle Rock and headed south on I-25. I didn't have a specific place in mind, but just driving felt okay for now. Around 2 p.m., I stopped at a truck stop to get gas and something to eat. After filling up, I parked in the back of the lot. Just as I was about to get out, I heard a tap on my window. A young woman was standing there. I rolled down the window and asked, "What's up?" She looked nervous and wouldn't meet my eyes, like she was struggling to speak. I noticed she was attractive and probably in her early 20s. Finally, she spoke, "This is really hard for me, but I'm starving. I haven't eaten in 2 days and I'm in pain. I'll give you a BJ for $20 so I can get some food." It was clear she wasn't a professional since she only asked for $20. I started to roll up the window, seeing her disappointment, but then I got out of the car and invited her inside for a meal. Her name was Maggie Thoman. We didn't talk much until we were seated in a booth. I asked why she was trying so hard just to get a meal. Before she could answer, the waitress came over, and Maggie ordered a burger and fries. I suggested we both get the 8-ounce steak dinner instead since it would be more filling. Maggie hesitated but then told me her story. She was running away from an abusive stepfather and an alcoholic mother. Her stepfather had threatened her, and her mother was too drunk or high to care. One night, Maggie took all the cash she could find and ran away. She planned to go to Houston, where her sister lived, but fell asleep on the bus to Denver. When she woke up, her purse was gone, leaving her stranded. She explained that her stepfather didn't act on his threats because he didn't want to be arrested for having relations with a minor. Maggie had just turned 18 the day she left. She had threatened to call the police, but her stepfather laughed, saying it would be her word against his. Her mother would side with him to keep getting pills. Maggie didn't want to take that risk. Our food arrived, and we ate quietly. Maggie didn't want dessert, she was ready to get back to hitchhiking. I decided to help her out since I was also trying to escape my own problems. After we paid, we got back in the car. She nervously admitted she had never done this before. I reassured her I wouldn't take advantage and offered her a ride to Houston. We drove until 8 and then stopped for gas and more food. While waiting, I asked if her sister knew she was coming. Maggie's phone had been stolen with her purse, so she hadn't contacted her sister. I gave her my phone to call her sister and gave her some privacy. When I came back, our food had arrived. Maggie said her sister was eager to see her and mentioned their mom had called, sounding sober, asking about Maggie. I suggested she call her mom, but Maggie wasn't ready yet. Maybe in a few days, she said. Once we were back on the road, Maggie asked, "You've heard my story. What about yours?" I filled her in. "Your dad and brother did that, and you didn't do anything to them." "What did your wife say?" she asked. I didn't ask her, I just left. Maybe she was being forced or blackmailed, Maggie suggested. She wasn't forced. I could tell from her reactions while I was taking the pictures. If she was being blackmailed, she could have told me and we could have figured something out. "I still think you should find out why," Maggie said. "Maybe someday, but I'm not ready for that right now," I replied. We stopped at a Days Inn, and I booked a room with 2 beds, but Maggie didn't want to stay alone. After her shower, she climbed into bed with me. She touched me and started moving her hand down my body. I grabbed her wrist and said, "No. But I want to," she said, "I owe you." "No, you don't owe me anything. I'm not going to take advantage of you. You were in a tough spot and desperate when you made that offer. I'm not doing this to pay you back. I want to do it because I want to. Is that okay?" I'm no saint, and Maggie was definitely attractive. Since I no longer felt tied to Sonia, I let go of Maggie's wrist. She took that as a yes, and we both enjoyed it. We grabbed a quick bite and kept driving. Since we'd reach Houston after midnight, I decided to stop around 9 instead of getting to her sister's place in the early hours. When I didn't get out of the car, she asked if I was coming in. I liked her, but I didn't see a future for us. I told her, I'd like to, but I can't. I'm behind schedule and need to keep moving. She looked disappointed but kissed me goodbye and thanked me before getting out. I watched her go inside, then checked into a motel and had a meal at IHOP, thinking about what to do next. I decided to visit the Alamo in San Antonio, about 3 hours from Houston. About 30 minutes outside Columbus, I saw a car pulled over with a man and woman hitchhiking. I stopped to help. The man, Ray, got in the front seat, and the woman, Sarah, in the back. A short while later, Ray pulled out a switchblade, demanding my cash and car. I reached for my .45 in the door pocket and said, "I don't think so." Before I could use it, Sarah used her purse straps to choke Ray. He dropped the knife and struggled, but she held on tight. I put the gun away, turned onto a dirt road, and pulled over. I took the knife, got out, and opened the passenger door. I told Sarah to let him go. She got her purse back, and Ray, now unconscious, slumped forward. I dragged him out and left him on the ground. I checked his pulse, he was still alive. I undressed him, rolled him into the ditch by the road, and tossed his clothes in the trunk. I then asked Sarah if she wanted to sit up front. "You're not going to leave me here, are you?" she asked. "Why would I do that?" I replied. She shrugged and moved up front. I made a U-turn, and we headed toward San Antonio. As we drove, I asked, "So, you weren't with him?" "No," she said. "My car broke down, and he offered me a ride. He turned out to be a jerk and wanted me to repay him by getting close. I was planning to stick around until he stopped for food or gas, then leave him. When he started threatening her, she knew she had to act, which is why she used the purse straps." I raised an eyebrow when she said she didn't care about the car. She explained it was her husband's company car, and he probably reported it stolen by now. Her plan was to leave it at the San Antonio airport and fly to San Diego. Seeing my reaction, she added, "I should probably tell you the whole story. She caught her husband cheating and, to get back at him, slept with his brother. She told her husband they were even and that he could either stop cheating or she'd keep hooking up with guys every time he did. He called her a 403 and said it was fine for men to cheat, but not for married women. He even claimed that men are programmed to reproduce and women to stay home and care for the family. Then he left her, saying he wouldn't live with a 403. That night, after he fell asleep, she took the car keys and left. She emptied the bank accounts the next morning and drove until the car broke down. I laughed at the coincidence, telling her my story of how I ended up on the road and picked her up. We both realized we were in similar situations. She mentioned her family in San Diego and her plans to stay with them until she got back on her feet. When I asked if she was in a hurry to get there, she said getting there was the only thing that mattered. I shared my plan to visit the Alamo in San Antonio and suggested we drive to San Diego together since I'd never been there. She agreed, happy to save on flight costs. In San Antonio, we visited the Alamo and the Riverwalk, then bought a road atlas to plan our route to San Diego. The drive would take about 2.5 days. We decided to leave the next morning and looked for a motel for the night. I asked if she preferred separate rooms or one with twin beds. She playfully suggested one room with one bed, wanting to get even with her soon-to-be ex. I agreed with a smile. It took us 6 days to drive the 1,500 miles to San Diego. We arrived at 6 p.m. on a Saturday, and I asked for her address. "Not tonight," she said. "I want to spend one more night with you before you leave." She looked at me and asked, "Have you ever tried something new in bed?" My husband Bert always wanted to, but I thought it was too gross. "I want to try it now." "Why now? What made you change your mind?" "I want to give you something I never gave Bert." We arrived at her mother's house around 6 o'clock. Sarah looked at me with a sad expression and said, "I'd like to invite you in, but it would be too awkward right now." When I called my mom, my dad answered the phone. Confused, I hung up. I decided to call Cindy instead. "Hello," Cindy answered. "Hi, Cindy, it's Bob. I'm in Dawson, Georgia, and I'm calling to check on things back home." I tried to call Mom, but Dad answered. "She did kick him out," Cindy said. "But he needed to collect his stuff, so Mom gave him the weekend to do that. She's staying with Aunt Mildred for now. How's it going with you?" "I hired a lawyer and filed for divorce. Dave's going to fight it, but I told him it's a waste of money. He can delay it but not stop it." "Did you know Dave and Dad moved in with Sonia after Mom and I kicked them out?" "I didn't know, but I don't care. They're all trash and deserve each other." "Exactly. When are you coming back?" Cindy asked. "I'm not. I wouldn't like being in jail." "Why do you think that?" "Because I shot David." "No, you didn't." "Yes, I did. Dad and Dave told the police it was an accident. They said Dave accidentally shot himself while trying to show Sonia how to use the gun you bought her. They took the gun outside, fired into the ground, and brought it back inside. And the police believe that." "Yes. What about the tires I damaged on Dad's car?" "I don't think the police ever knew about that." "Why would they do that?" "Dad said the business couldn't handle the scandal. Dave wanted to blame you, but Dad wouldn't let him." "I'm still not coming back, at least. Not for a while. If I did, I'd probably run into Dad and David and want to hurt them." "You still need to come back. Mom needs you, Rob. She needs help with the business. She doesn't need me. She has David. David is useless. Now that Dad isn't around to cover for him, it's clear he can't do anything." "But you probably already knew that." "I knew David was useless, but he was family and it was Dad's company. If Dad didn't care, why should I?" I asked Cindy, "How are you doing?" "Everything okay?" "That's a silly question," she replied. "You know how I am. You're probably dealing with the same stuff I am. I'm sorry for dumping all this on you. I'm actually glad you did. We were talking about having a baby. If I had a child and found out what Dave was doing, I'd end up as a single mother. You saved me from that." "I'll stay in touch," I said before hanging up. I thought about what Cindy said. It didn't match what I'd heard from Mom. Mom said Sonia was desperate to talk to me and nearly ended her life. Cindy's version was different. How could Sonia be desperate to reach me but still let those two losers move in with her? I shook my head in disbelief. The next morning, shouting outside woke me up. I saw a man shove a woman to the ground before speeding away. I went outside to help her. And she explained she had nowhere to go, as they had already checked out and she only had $40 left. I offered her to wait in my room, but she said she was in big trouble with no way to get home to St. Paul, Minnesota. When I saw a man shove a woman to the ground and drive off, I decided to help. I offered her a ride to Minneapolis. She was initially wary, so I suggested she note my driver's license and license plate for safety. She asked if I planned to make a move on her. I promised I wouldn't pursue her, but wouldn't resist if she made a move. We agreed and Pinky swore on it. Her name was Mary. She was 31, married, and worked as an office manager in St. Paul. Her husband had left her with a rude parting remark, and she was eager to move on. She planned to use her law firm's discount to file for divorce when she got back. I was curious about her situation but decided not to pry. Mary wanted to hear my story, and her reaction was similar to Sarah's. She was surprised I hadn't dealt with my father and brother. I explained that it wasn't worth the consequences. Mary was set on divorce, while I was still unsure, considering walking away and letting her handle it later. I asked Mary if she was in a hurry, and she said 3 days to get home was fine. I usually drive about 700 miles a day, so the trip would take about 3 days. She agreed with that. Mary read a book while I hummed along to oldies on the radio. After a few hours, she shared her story. During a trip to Mexico, she saw her husband, Jake, with another woman while she was drunk. When she confronted him, he blamed her and implied it wasn't the first time. Jake left her at the motel when she mentioned consulting a lawyer. We stopped for the night, and I offered separate rooms, but Mary trusted me. The room had twin beds. After her shower, I was already in bed and quickly fell asleep. The next morning, we had breakfast and continued our trip. Mary asked if she could sleep with me for cuddling. I hesitated but agreed. She was surprised at my restraint when she felt my arousal but didn't move away. We arrived in St. Paul around 5:30 p.m. Mary directed me to a Best Western and expressed her desire for what she hadn't gotten the night before. She was surprised I hadn't made a move when she got into bed naked, but now she was making advances. I was curious about her husband's infidelity but didn't dwell on it. Mary and I spent the night together. The next day, Mary introduced me to her sister Julia, Julia's daughter Jessica, and Jessica's boyfriend. Mary told them about our trip. Julia asked if I was heading back to Michigan, and I said I hadn't decided yet. Julia offered me a chance to save on airfare by giving Jessica a ride to the University of Michigan. I agreed to help. That evening, Julia visited me and revealed she was struggling since her husband died 9 months ago and needed closeness. She was at least 15 years older but still attractive, so I decided to go for it. Julia and I were intimate. Later, Mary joined me and said she was glad I was leaving but not in a bad way. She mentioned I might visit again. I checked my watch and saw I had time to call home before picking up the kids. Glenda answered at Dawson & Sons and put me through to my mom. "Bobby, where are you?" Mom asked. "St. Paul, Minnesota. What are you doing there?" "Heading back home. Thank goodness. I need you here to help with the business. I might not come back to work." "Damn it, Robert, I need you here. How will I keep you and David apart? I can't face him." "You don't have to worry. I fired him for stealing." There was a pause before I said, "I took $15,000 from the company before I left. I didn't see it as stealing, just severance." "How's that miserable piece of work?" "I assume you're not in jail for ending him." "I don't know where he is, and I don't care. Sonia kicked him and your brother out." "I spoke with Sonia last. I don't know why she kicked them out, but we can sort the money out later. It's treated as an advance on your wages. You might have to pay some of it back when you return." I told Mom I'd see her soon and then drove to Julia's to pick up Jessica. Julia greeted me warmly and gave Jessica advice. I helped carry Jessica's bags to the car and learned that Mike wasn't coming because Jessica broke up with him. Jessica and I chatted on the drive. She was going to the University of Michigan on a scholarship and studying pre-law. I asked her to pick a radio station, but she preferred reading. After about 4 hours, she asked where we would stop for the night. I said there was no need, but agreed to find a place since we'd arrive late. Jessica wanted to see if the rumors about me were true. She mentioned she heard I was good in bed and wanted to find out for herself. We spent the night together, and she was pleased with the experience. We stayed at a motel until her dorm check-in deadline. She gave me her number, kissed me, and said she'd need me. I left feeling great and drove to Ypsilanti. I checked into a motel and set up a wake-up call. The next morning, I arrived at Dawson & Sons right when it opened. Glenda greeted me with a hug and said, "Thank God you're back. Maybe now we can get things sorted out." I went to Mom's office. "It's about time you showed up. There's a huge stack of stuff on your desk that needs attention right away. I haven't decided if I'm staying yet. You need to be here. Running away won't solve your problems. You're needed. Now, get to work. We can talk at lunch." Jessica wanted to stop for the night since she had time before checking into her dorm. She also wanted to see if the rumors about me were true. She mentioned that her mom and Aunt Mary talked about me being amazing in bed. I was surprised but curious. Jessica said her past experiences were not great, and she wanted to see if I was really as good as they said. She asked if I had any unusual interests or fantasies. I noticed she seemed intrigued by the idea of a man who had been with her mother and aunt. Jessica wasn't sure she could handle the pressure and wasn't expecting a superstar, but my reputation was good enough for her. She shared a bad experience she had with her prom date, and I reassured her that I hoped to be much better. That night, we were intimate. She was happy with the experience and wanted to do it again. We spent the night together, only leaving to eat until it was time for her dorm check-in. She gave me her number, kissed me, and told me she'd need me. She felt that boys her age wouldn't compare to me. After saying goodbye, I left feeling great. I drove to Ypsilanti, checked into a motel, and set a wake-up call. The next morning, I arrived at Dawson & Sons right when it opened. I could have let myself in with my keys, but it didn't feel right. When George, the security guard, opened the door, he welcomed me back. Glenda at the reception hugged me and said she was glad I was back, hoping we could get things sorted out. I went to Mom's office. She looked up and said, "It's about time you showed up. There's a huge stack of stuff on your desk that needs attention right away." "I haven't decided if I'm staying yet," I said. "Nonsense. You need to be here. Running away won't solve your problems. You're needed here. Now, get to work. We can talk at lunch. She was right, so I decided not to fight it. The stack of papers was big, but I started working through it. Around 12:30, Mom came by and said it was time for lunch. We went to Pegasus, and after we'd ordered, Mom asked if I'd been home yet. I told her no. I stayed at a motel last night. Why didn't you just go home? She asked. Because Sonia is there. You're going to have to face her eventually, so why not do it now? Mom said. Why are you so eager for me to deal with her? Given what she did with your husband, you should want her to suffer. It might not make sense to you, but I want my Robbie back, and that won't happen until you sort out this mess. To do that, you need answers to your questions to get closure. What questions? Like why did she do it? What might I have done to cause it? How long did it go on? Were your father and brother the only ones? There might be more questions, but you need to resolve them to move on. I knew she was right. Despite having questions, I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answers. Was it because I wasn't satisfying Sonia in bed? My experiences with Maggie, Mary, Julia, and Jess made me think I was pretty good, but was I with Sonia? And why, of all people, my father and brother? I went back to work and made significant progress on a stack of papers. At 5:30, I left work and got into my car. As I approached the exit, I debated whether to head to the motel or go home. I took a deep breath and turned left. Sonia's car was in the garage, so I knew she was home. I sat in my car, staring at the house, trying to gather the courage to go inside. Finally, I told myself to just do it. I got out and walked up to the front steps. As I reached for the door handle, it swung open, and Sonia was standing there. She immediately threw herself at me, crying, "You're okay. Thank God you're okay," while hugging me tightly. I was so taken aback by her reaction that I just stood there for a moment, but then I shook it off and pushed her away. As I moved Sonia aside and walked into the house, she followed me, crying, "Why did you push me away? I love you." I turned to face her. "You love me, but you slept with my father and brother. I can't imagine what you'd do if you hated me." Sonia was confused. "You don't understand. I had to do it. You had to do it." I replied. "I need to hear this. Go sit at the kitchen table while I pour myself a strong drink. I'll need it to handle whatever nonsense you're about to give me." With a Jack on the Rocks in hand, I joined her at the table. I sat down and said, "I didn't want to be here, but Mom convinced me I had to face you. Now, go ahead, Sonia, tell me." Sonia began. "Do you remember Karen's birthday party? The one you missed because you were out of town?" "I remember. You told me to go even if you couldn't, so I went," I said. Sonia continued. "Cindy was at her sick mother's, so Dave was there alone. When he saw I was by myself, he started following me around. He decided to be my watchdog for the night, but he wasn't very good at it. Someone there, probably Dave, noticed I was alone and spiked one of my drinks with some kind of date rape pills. My watchdog didn't see what happened but noticed I was disoriented and figured something was wrong. Dave thought it was Kyle Barger because he saw Kyle hanging around me a lot. Dave got me out of there and took me home. I can't be sure if that's exactly how it went because by then, I was pretty out of it. I only know what Dave told me the next day. Once he got me home, he took off my clothes and put me to bed. Then he undressed and climbed in with me. He said he couldn't resist. He had always wanted me and saw a chance to do it without me knowing. I'd wake up the next morning with some idea that something had happened but no clear memory of how or who did it. I later learned that date rape pills affect your body differently from your mind. Even if your brain is out of it, your body's senses are still active. As you come out of the pill's effects, you're already deep into the act and feeling everything intensely, just like you would with regular sex. You know how I become completely uninhibited when I'm close to or reaching a peak. That's where I was when I started coming back to my senses. I was lying there, begging for more intensity and speed, not even realizing it was Dave. That's when your dad showed up. He was doing his usual check-in on me while you were away. He walked in, saw what was happening, and started taking pictures with his phone. I didn't even know he was there at the time. He took several pictures and got in bed with me. When Dave finished and got off, your dad took his place. After your dad finished, Dave was ready again and took over. It was during Dave's second turn that I started realizing who was with me, but by then, I was so out of it that it didn't matter who it was, as long as I was getting off. I don't know how many times they had sex with me before they got dressed and left, but it left me exhausted and I fell asleep. That afternoon, Dave came over and begged me not to tell you or Cindy about what he had done. While he was there, your dad showed up and said he was back for more. When I told him to leave, he laughed and showed me the pictures he had taken. He said if I treated him well, you would never see those photos. I couldn't let you see them because they didn't show someone being forced. They showed a woman who looked like she loved sex. I later realized I should have told both of them to leave and trusted you to believe me, but that's easy to say in hindsight. How many times did this happen? I asked. Every time you went on a trip, Sonia replied. I stared at her in shock. Karen's birthday party was 7 months ago, and I've been away on a dozen trips since then. That's more than half a dozen. I've been away on 9 trips, including the one during Karen's birthday. Sonia looked away. I'm sorry. I shook my head. That's nonsense, Sonia. You kept doing it because you enjoyed it. You wouldn't let me do it because you thought it was disgusting, but you liked it and didn't want it to end. That's why you didn't come to me and tell me what happened, hoping I would believe you. She looked at me with a new expression. No, I didn't just like it. I loved it. I wanted even more than I was getting, but I couldn't risk it while you were around. I honestly thought if I only did it when you were away, you'd never find out. I enjoyed it a lot, but I love you and didn't want to lose you. Were David and my dad the only ones? I asked. No, Sonia said. Your dad brought 3 other guys with him 3 times. I was stunned. Wow, this just keeps getting worse. You were involved in group sex. You slept with 9 different guys, and I bet you enjoyed that too. I did, Sonia admitted. And it wasn't 9 different guys. It was the same 3 each time. Do I know any of them? I asked. Are they people I see regularly who might be secretly laughing at me? No, Sonia said. I think they were just customers your dad was entertaining. I don't understand, Sonia. You say you love me, but you did this to me. For 7 months, my father and brother were laughing behind my back every time they saw me. They were making a fool of me, leaving me with the aftermath. I know, Sonia said. I didn't mean to hurt you. I felt partly responsible for their situation. I could have ended it after the first time, but I didn't. I let it continue and that's how we got caught. I told them there would be no more of this when they moved in. I didn't know if I could get you back, but I knew I definitely wouldn't have a chance if I kept going with them. One night, they tried to get me drunk so they could take advantage of me, but I figured out their plan and made them leave. It took me pointing a gun at your dad to get them to go. Do you think I'd want to come back after seeing what was happening and knowing the truth? I asked. I still had hope, Sonia said. I know we see things differently, but aside from the shock of finding out, did it hurt you? You got all the love and affection you wanted. I never said no to you, and most of the time, I was the one chasing you. That's not true, I said. You've turned me down plenty of times. When did I do that? Sonia asked. Every time I wanted to try from behind, you said no, I said. But my father had no problem with it. I didn't give it to him, Sonia said. He and Dave took it that night when I was drugged, and I found out I liked it. You never got it because you never asked for it after I discovered I liked it. I thought about suggesting it, but I decided against it since I'd previously refused so often. I didn't want you to think I was just curious or suspicious. I figured I'd wait until you asked again and then agree to try it, but you never asked. She paused and then said, since we're talking about it, maybe it could be a great welcome home gift. Maybe if I were coming home, I said, but that's not likely. Her face fell as she asked, why not? Why would I stay with someone I know I can't satisfy? Why would I stay with someone who always wants or needs multiple partners? I never said that, I replied. You've always satisfied me, always. I don't need more than what you can give me. Yes, I discovered I liked it more, but I don't need it. What I need is you. Even if you want to get back at me, find someone else, but please come back to me. I thought about my travels and decided to stay quiet. I admit I was tempted by her offer, but I never acted on it. Just then, the front door slammed open, and my brother David limped into the room using a cane, a Colt in his other hand. I've been waiting for you to come back, you jerk, David said. I'm going to take out both your knees and see how you like it. I'm your blood, for crying out loud. How could you do this to me? What? Did you think you'd get a medal for sleeping with my wife? I should have just ended you. Forget you, he said, aiming the Colt at my knees. No, Sonia screamed, throwing herself between me and David just as he fired. Shocked, David and I both reacted. I tackled him, he dropped the Colt, and I hit him 3 times in the face, knocking him to the floor. I grabbed the Colt and hit him in the head. With it, then turned to Sonia, who was on the floor bleeding. I called for emergency help and ran to the kitchen for a towel. Kneeling beside her, I tried to stop the bleeding. She looked up at me, whispering, don't leave me, please don't leave me. The EMTs and police arrived, and they called for another ambulance for David. I guess I had been a bit too rough. David kept waking up while I was trying to help Sonia, so I had to hit him again with the Colt to keep him down. I think I hit him 6 times. It was a close call, Sonia bleeding on the floor, a messed up brother, and me standing there unharmed. I spent an hour talking to the police, but they accepted my version of events. It helped that I had recorded everything on my phone as I approached the front steps. They had just left when I got the call. Sonia had died in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. I was devastated. Sonia's actions showed me how much she cared for me. If she had survived, I probably, no, almost certainly would have given our marriage another chance. The whole incident made the news, and about a week later, I came home from work to find Jess waiting for me on the front porch steps. She stood up and greeted me with a hug. "How are you holding up?" she asked. "Just barely," I replied. "What brings you here?" "I saw what Mom went through after losing Dad," Jess said. "She needed something to hold on to. I thought you might need someone now too. We had something really special, so I thought I could step in and help." Our relationship lasted 5 months before Jess told me it was over. She had met someone new, felt a strong connection, and decided she had to move on. David's trial didn't start until nearly 8 months later. He tried to argue it was an accident and he never meant to hurt anyone, but no one bought it, and he was sentenced to 20 years to life. On the day he was sentenced, Cindy called me and asked for a favor. She wanted me to sleep with her so she could tell David. Cindy was attractive, and I saw no reason not to help her. She wore me out, and the next day, she went to see David during visiting hours and told him what she had done. She didn't get the reaction she expected. Instead of getting angry and shouting at her, David just sat there and cried. A week later, Cindy came to see me again. "I could use a friend with benefits. Do you know anyone who might be interested?" We were involved for another 4 months, but then Cindy got a promotion at work and moved to Dallas. I was sorry to see her go. I thought about going with her, but she talked me out of it. "I like you, Rob. I like you a lot, but I don't love you. I need to find someone I love and who loves me. I'm starting a new life in Dallas and hope to find what I need there." My father tried several times to reach out, but I refused to talk to him. When he died of a stroke, I went to his funeral and made a scene. In front of about 15 people, I urinated into his grave as they lowered the coffin. Talking to my mom, I found out the names of 3 customers who were very close to my father. They might not have been the same ones he took to see Sonia, and I might never be sure, but I decided they were the ones and made them pay in my way. I didn't hurt them physically, but I messed with them. They were still customers, so I targeted them through the business. They ended up paying 2 to 4 cents more per unit than other customers and never got the same quantity discounts. It wasn't much of a revenge, but mentally I needed to do something. I know it was unfair to target them without being sure they were involved. It might have just been my imagination, but sometimes I thought I saw a smirk on their faces. Still, I'm human, and like most people, I felt a strong urge to get even if I was wrong, my mental state was better for having done something rather than nothing. Let karma handle the rest. There was one unexpected outcome from all this. 10 months after returning home, I was sitting at home reading the financial section of the New York Times when my cell phone rang. "Hello, Rob. It's Maggie. Do you remember me?" "I do. My sister saved your number from when I used your phone to call her." "Well, my sister insisted that I call you. Believe me, I didn't want to, but she thinks you have a right to know." "Know what?" "You're a father. You have twin sons. Are you serious?" "Yes, I'm serious. You're the only man I've ever been with." There was a brief pause, then Maggie said, "I'm not asking for anything. I only called because Chris insisted it was the right thing to do." 36 hours later, I was knocking on the door of a house in Houston, ready to start a new chapter in my life. Hey there, amazing people. Get ready to smash that subscribe button on the YouTube channel and hit the bell icon to turn on notifications. Thank you so much for tuning in. I can't wait to catch you in the next video. Stay awesome.